you doing? Yeah, where are you? Hi. Well, thanks for coming. Nice meeting with the president. Talking about our concerns with what's going on in South Sudan and the lead up to the war. I think we're very impressed with how involved at the highest level this administration is. And now our job is to try and continue to keep it in the press, keep the light turned on for the next 90 days while we try and broker a peace deal with the working.
Have you had any conversations with Gratian at all in the last few days? What has he told you about the negotiations, the state of negotiations?
I'm John Prendergast from the Enough Project. Just carry his suitcase. We've talked to a number of people. We saw Ambassador Rice in Juba, and we've talked to a number of senior officials. We haven't yet talked to Scott. He's going to be either tonight or tomorrow. He's going to be at one of the events we're going to do, so we'll have a chance to interact with him.
So talks will be going on. They're continuing.
He's not back yet from Addis, so we didn't have a chance to see if he was in Ethiopia at the time when we were in South Sudan, and he's coming back apparently tonight.
But the talks are continuing as we speak right now.
Mr. Clooney, how fragile is the peace? How fragile is the process there from the last time you were there?
Well, it's a very different time than the last time we were there. This is a time now where people in South Sudan have been enslaved and have been sold and have been raped and slaughtered for generations, and they earned the right to vote for their freedom. In 2005, they earned that right. They believe they have that right of January 9th, and they're going to vote that way. And they seem very resolute. And it's there's a border issue, and there's oil, and there's all those kind of things that create the recipe for the same disasters that we've seen before. To think that the government of Khartoum would act any differently than they have the two times they've had an opportunity. In North-South before, they cost 2.5 million lives, and in Darfur, they cost 200,000 or 300,000 lives. Left alone in a vacuum, this government will act aggressively.
Are you going to be there for the elections on January 9th?
George, do you have any concerns about General Gratian's leadership, and what do you think will happen in January if violence does break out? Do you think there's the international will to send troops into Sudan? I don't think at this point there's any discussion about sending troops into South Sudan. Right now, we've got 90 days to do this. It doesn't cost a dime. It doesn't cost any lives. No American troops. This is not a right or left issue, as you well know. I've worked with Sam Brown back before. We're going to meet with Senator Lugar in a few minutes. So the truth of the matter is, right now, at this moment, there's an opportunity here to negotiate this. To negotiate a peace treaty. It's complicated and it's difficult, and it means negotiating with people you don't necessarily like, you don't necessarily get along with. This administration seems committed to it. And we have to focus on that right now rather than focusing on the idea of the aftermath. I'd rather us prevent one than have to triage at the end.
And one very impressive thing about the meeting we just had is this president is very focused, very knowledgeable about the details, very in control of the policies, breath of fresh air, and gives a chance to diplomacy, gives a chance to peacemaking that didn't exist 3 months ago. So I think the U.S. being in the game in support of the African Union peace process is potentially the game changer that the Sudanese people have been looking for. Now they have to follow through.
And do you have faith in General Gratian's leadership? I think in General Gratian's leadership, I think General Gratian could use all of our help as well. You know, remember that this is also the responsibility of the international community. We could use some of the European nations that aren't being as tough on the government of Khartoum. You know, he isn't spending his money in Sudanese pounds. You know, it's in euros, it's in other forms. We need to find out where that money is and there's pressures that we can put on this on the government that we, in many ways, the United States have already used up. You know, short of military power and no one's suggesting.
In the past years, you were saying that the international community, and especially the United Nations, are too slow to answer to what's happening. Is it
south before. We were late in Darfur. We were late in Rwanda. We've been late. We show up and we'll do 3 years later. We'll do fundraisers and we'll spend $1 billion. There's $1 billion being spent, nearly $1 billion for the United States in the Sudan now. We're going to be there one way or another. The hope is that we can be there this time before and not have to just mop up the mess after.
What did the president say in the meeting to you about the Sudan, and what were his commitments?
I mean, first of all, he evinced a very clear and deep knowledge about the details of the negotiations that are going on there. Secondly, he's committed to doing his administration to do all it can. We're going to get behind this administration and say, go the extra mile. They're marching in a way that we hadn't expected, doing a lot more than we had hoped, but we need to do more to prevent a war. And there's a chance to do it. This is the great news. This is the good news story of Sudan right now, is that we're in front of it, and it's possible to prevent the war through robust diplomacy. And I think that the president understands what needs to be done. The American people just need to get behind him and support him in a tough election year, in a time when there's a lot of divisions, that this is okay to do.
And supporting, and we're talking about, this is not a democratic issue, as we well know. Anyone who was at the Darfur rally, and these are the same players, remember, the same people involved. This has been led by church groups. This has been led by young people. This is at a time that is one of the most politicized times ever. This is something that everyone agrees on, which is if there's some way that we can get ahead of this and stop it before it happens, we better.
What specifically do you want to see the U.S. do again? I'm sorry if you addressed
Well, a robust diplomacy, a real robust diplomacy, which means having talks with obviously the government of Khartoum, and offering, which is never all that popular amongst certain activists. It means offering some carrots. It also means offering some, pretty prickly sticks along the way. It means finding a way to negotiate like we do. The one thing we've been very good at over generations in the United States is negotiating. It's something we're good at. So it'd be nice to continue and hope that we can do a little bit better.
What do you make of the UN role in this?
Well, the UN's unbelievably important. We were there we saw the UNIVIS forces. I think that they need a stronger mandate. I think they think they need a stronger mandate. Their mandate now is Chapter 6. And Chapter 6 doesn't necessarily protect the citizenry often, not enough. And Chapter 7, I think, there's certain places in the Congo that's been very effective, and I think that would help a lot.
And George and I were just in Abyei. We were just along the border areas, and they're very vulnerable. Likely, if there's conflict's going to break out, it's going to be in those border areas. There's only a few spots. The message we kept hearing from Sudanese on the ground is create demilitarized zones in certain locations and staff those demilitarized zones with the troops that are already there. Don't send new troops. There are already 20,000, 18,000 United Nations forces in Sudan. Redeploy them to those vulnerable hotspots and ensure that we have 24-hour, 7-day-a-week coverage so that we can deter the potential of militia attacks, buildup of troops, tanks, air, all those kinds of things that are going to be what triggers the war.
We just want to know, one of the things that's happened over the years with the government of Khartoum is that they've been able to succeed in a vacuum, and that's happened a lot. We need to turn the lights on as much as we can. If that means that UN troops can see the tanks lining up on the borders, which we've heard from the governments, from the villagers in Abyei, then that's good. Listen, I'm happy if they're nice guys working at Google. If Google Earth wants to point a satellite over on the border and say, well, let's see if those are tanks and helicopters lining up there. Put it up live for everybody to watch. Okay? I mean, we need to turn on the lights in every way we possibly can to make it difficult for this to happen again. There's a tremendous amount of danger involved right now for the people of Sudan.
What's the mandate for the AU as you talk about the international community? What's the mandate for the African Union?
Well, the African Union is leading the peace talks. Thabo Mbeki, the former president of South Africa, is the leader of the talks. The United States has now, over the last 2 weeks, stepped into this somewhat of an international vacuum and provided some real support for the African Union mediation. There were secret talks in Long Island and now talks in Addis Ababa. There are plans to resume those talks later on this month. I mean, that's what we want to see. We want to see the U.S. much more aggressively in support of the African Union, coordinating with the African Union, getting the Europeans in the game much more than they are up until now, so that the international community, Arab League, African Union, U.S. and Europe, and China together are working on those parties to make the compromises necessary.
But would you say the African Union was somewhat of a holdup because Africans tended to want Africans to take care of what was happening in Africa versus people from other countries?
Well, I mean, all of these are negotiations, right? And it's never going to work out easily, and it's never going to be what everybody's happy with, ever. And so the ABA, which is, you know, people are going to hear a lot of stories, and we're giving you doing too much information for a lot of people. But ABA has its own vote, and ABA itself is where all the oil is, basically. There's going to be all kinds of discussions over how you share that oil from that place, who gets to vote. Those are the reasons that the talks broke down yesterday. Now, that they broke down primarily, they think, because they were trying to figure out who's allowed to vote. Okay, well, talks break down. They're going to continue to break down. They're going to come back, and they're going to continue to break down and come back. Our hope is that no one stops negotiating all the way through. That's what we want, and we love the rest of the international community to get on board with us.
And what do you expect precisely from the international community, specifically?
Well, you know, we'd love to have England not soften its stance with doing business with Khartoum, which is you see some signs of. We'd like to remind people that that he has been indicted by the ICC, and it's not necessarily who you should be doing business with. And we'd like to see the international community stiffen up the sanctions that we've been using. You know, we start to run out of sanctions after a while. There's not a whole lot more we can take away. But the international community has a lot. You know, there's a lot of money out there that those guys hold. That's a way to make a move.
Yeah, it's not just a theory of ours that maybe diplomacy can actually stop a war. In 2005, a peace agreement ended the war, and ended because the Europeans and the Americans and the Africans and the Arabs all together were forcing the parties into one specific outcome, which was a peace deal. That's what we need to recreate, and that's going to require a lot more work. The United States government has started to amp it up. They got to redouble their efforts, and they got to work with the leadership in a number of these different capitals in Europe and the Arab League and African Union to actually apply that kind of pressure and push those parties to the compromises necessary for peace.
Okay, we're going to go
you
see
say your
Senator
name?
Lugar. And now we're going to
John Prendergast.
and we're going to go meet Senator Lugar now. So we'll thanks a lot.